It started like any other traffic stop, but it quickly turned into a scene no one expected. The sun had just dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the streets of downtown Chicago. The city's heartbeat slowed, but for Officer Dan Reynolds, the night was just beginning. Known throughout the 8th Precinct for his hard-nosed approach and zero-tolerance attitude, Reynolds was always hunting for trouble, or at least something he could turn into a bust. As he cruised down Ashland Avenue in his patrol car, something caught his eye, a black SUV circling the block for the 3rd time. Tinted windows, no visible plates. It fit the kind of profile he didn't like. Suspicious, he muttered to himself, flipping on the sirens without hesitation. Red and blue lights painted the street as his car roared up behind the SUV. A blaring horn cut through the night. The SUV slowed, signal clicked on, and it pulled over smoothly next to the curb. To Reynolds, that alone was odd. Too smooth. Too calm. He expected nervous drivers, panicked mistakes. But this one was deliberate, and that only fueled his suspicion. He threw the door open, hand already resting on the grip of his holstered weapon. "Let's see what we've got here," he said, approaching the driver's side with a swagger that was all too familiar to anyone who'd seen him work. But what Officer Reynolds didn't realize was he had just pulled over someone way out of his league. Behind the tinted glass sat a man in his mid-40s. Trim haircut, clean-shaven jawline, dark sunglasses despite the fading light. He wasn't startled, wasn't scrambling for papers. He just sat there, still alert, composed. This was Agent Michael Trent, a 15-year veteran of the FBI and the lead operative in a multi-agency undercover operation targeting one of the most dangerous gang networks in the Midwest. For the past 2 months, Trent had been embedded in the shadows, gathering intelligence, making covert contacts, and staying off the radar of not just criminals, but also local law enforcement. Tonight, he was in the middle of surveillance. He had looped the block multiple times to maintain visual on a key suspect entering a building nearby. The last thing he needed was a traffic stop. Reynolds banged twice on the window. It rolled down. "License and registration," the officer demanded. "What are you doing driving around here like a criminal?" The tone was sharp. Accusatory. Not curious. Hostile. Trent didn't flinch. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Reynolds. Behind those glasses, his expression didn't change. Calm. Controlled. "Officer," he said in a steady voice, "I'm going to advise you to take a step back. You're making a very serious mistake." That only made Reynolds angrier. His jaw clenched. His posture stiffened. "Oh, we got a tough guy, huh?" Reynolds snapped, taking a step closer. His hand moved subtly toward his holster. "I'm not here to play games. Out of the car. Now." Inside the SUV, Trent quietly activated a body camera embedded in his lapel. FBI issued. Standard for agents in sensitive operations. He knew the protocol, and he also knew that any sudden moves could make things worse. He was trained for this, but still, the situation was becoming dangerous. "Officer," he said again, his voice like steel, "I'm a federal agent, currently involved in a classified operation. Your actions are interfering with active federal law enforcement duties. I strongly recommend you contact your supervisor." Reynolds scoffed. "Federal agent? Anyone can say that. Anyone can flash a fake badge. I'm not buying it." The tension in the air was thick. 2 men, both trained, both in law enforcement, but only one of them understood the full weight of what was unfolding. And in that moment, it was clear this wasn't going to end like a routine traffic stop. Officer Reynolds ignored every standard procedure drilled into him during his years on the force. No call for backup. No request for vehicle records. No verification through dispatch. Just raw suspicion and a growing sense of personal authority. He stepped closer to the SUV, now inches from the driver's side window, his voice rising with each command. "Get out of the vehicle. Now," he barked. "What are you hiding in there, huh? Drugs? Weapons? Stolen goods?" Inside the SUV, Agent Michael Trent stayed still. His breathing was calm, but his mind was racing. His mission was time-sensitive. The building down the block still had a high-value target inside. Every second spent dealing with this patrol officer was a second his team was flying blind. Trent slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his identification, a sleek black leather wallet with a gold-embossed FBI badge. He flipped it open and held it up, making sure it was clearly visible under the streetlight. Special Agent Michael Trent, FBI. I'm on assignment. Step away from the vehicle. But instead of the reaction one would expect, relief, cooperation, a call to verify, the officer scoffed. Reynolds leaned closer, squinting at the badge like it was a party trick. FBI, huh? Cute. That thing looks like something from a souvenir shop. Anyone can make a fake badge these days. Agent Trent narrowed his eyes behind his sunglasses, lowering the badge ever so slightly. He knew this moment was turning. He knew Reynolds wasn't just skeptical. He was letting his ego take over. Officer, Trent said, voice measured, every word deliberate. I am part of a classified federal operation. Your actions are not only inappropriate, they're compromising active surveillance. This is your final warning. Stand down. But instead of listening, Officer Reynolds reached for his weapon. With a single motion, his hand moved toward the grip of his holstered sidearm, his voice escalating to a full-throated shout. I said out of the vehicle. Hands where I can see him. Tension crackled in the air like static. For Agent Trent, years of tactical training kicked in. He didn't reach for his weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He simply raised his hands slightly, showing palms. Not in fear, but in control. His FBI training taught him that sometimes the most powerful move was restraint. You are escalating a situation you don't understand, Trent said firmly. And everything you're doing right now, it's being recorded. What Reynolds hadn't noticed, what most street cops wouldn't even think to check, was the small, nearly invisible camera embedded in Trent's lapel. Along with it, the vehicle itself was equipped with a dual-channel dash cam and interior recorder, all linked to a secure FBI server. Everything was being captured. Every word, every movement, every mistake. Reynolds didn't know it yet, but the footage from this stop would soon be reviewed by the Department of Justice, FBI Internal Affairs, and even his own precinct's integrity unit. And it wouldn't stop there. The moment would go viral, clipped, captioned, shared. A local cop challenging a calm, composed federal agent. A man in uniform refusing to recognize authority that outranked his own. Back on the street, Reynolds still had his hand hovering over his weapon. But something in Trent's calm demeanor, something in the way he never wavered, gave the officer just enough pause. Then, in the distance, sirens. But not from local units. From federal backup. Reynolds turned his head, slightly, as an unmarked black sedan sped around the corner. Two men in suits jumped out with badges already in hand, shouting, "Federal agents! Step away from the vehicle." Reynolds froze. And in that moment, he finally realized he wasn't in control anymore. Just as Officer Reynolds' hand inched closer to his weapon, the quiet street was shattered by the sound of screeching tires. An unmarked black sedan came to a hard stop behind Reynolds' patrol car. Its doors flung open, and two men in dark suits emerged with precision and urgency. They moved quickly, but with unmistakable authority. The kind of presence that comes from years of federal training, and the confidence that comes with carrying real power. Both agents raised their badges high. One of them shouted, loud and clear, "Officer, back away from the vehicle. That man is a federal agent." The words hit Reynolds like a brick wall. He stepped back instinctively, his face contorting from aggression to confusion. His hand moved away from his holster as his eyes darted between the agents and Trent, still seated calmly inside the SUV. "What? Wait, nobody told me." Reynolds stammered, voice rising with panic. How was I supposed to know he was FBI? The lead agent, a tall man with sharp features and a clipped tone, didn't flinch. "You didn't ask," he snapped. "You didn't verify. You didn't even radio it in. We're in the middle of a highly sensitive operation targeting multiple gang leaders. Weeks of surveillance. Weeks of prep. You just compromised all of it because you thought someone looked suspicious." Reynolds tried to explain himself, voice low, more defensive than before. He was driving in circles. The windows were tinted. It just didn't look right. From the other side of the SUV, Agent Trent finally stepped out. Still calm, still composed. He took off his sunglasses, revealing sharp eyes that had seen far worse than this, but were clearly disappointed. He looked directly at Reynolds, his voice cold and measured. You racially profiled a federal agent. You ignored protocol. You escalated a non-confrontational situation. And now, you've jeopardized an entire federal investigation. Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, but had no words. For the first time during the entire encounter, he stood silent. The other federal agents stood in position, watchful, professional, and clearly frustrated. Their operation was delicate. Every detail mattered. And now, because of one local officer's ego and recklessness, the entire mission had been put at risk. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. The street, once calm, now buzzed with tension. Inside Reynolds' mind, panic swirled. His authority had crumbled in seconds. What started as a power move had turned into a career-threatening mistake. His confidence, his control, even his purpose, all of it had evaporated under the weight of the federal presence. He mumbled, barely audible, "I was just doing my job." Agent Trent stepped in once more, this time even closer. "No, you weren't. Doing your job means checking facts, following protocol, knowing when you're out of your depth. You acted on instinct, not intelligence. And now your mistake is going to follow you a lot longer than this street corner." A nearby civilian, unnoticed until now, raised a phone and hit stop on a recording. The incident was already in the cloud. The federal agents turned to regroup. There was still work to be done, damage to control, assets to reposition. But for Reynolds, it was over. In just 5 minutes, he had gone from a self-styled enforcer, loud, commanding, confident, to the center of a federal review, an internal affairs inquiry, and soon a viral internet scandal. The badge on his chest still shone in the streetlight. But now, it meant something very different. The footage didn't stay buried in internal files. It didn't sit behind a federal firewall or get quietly tucked into an HR case file. It leaked, and when it hit the internet, it exploded. Within hours, clips of the incident were cut, captioned, edited with dramatic music, and spread like wildfire across every major social platform. Titles like, "Local Cop Harris's FBI Agent Gets Reality Check," "Cop Tries to Intimidate Fed, Regrets It Instantly," "FBI Agent Calmly Destroys Power-Tripping Officer," flooded YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter X. The video began with Officer Reynolds shouting aggressively at Agent Trent, demanding he exit the SUV. Viewers were immediately hooked. It had all the ingredients of a viral hit: tension, conflict, authority abuse, and instant karma. Millions watched, horrified yet fascinated, as Reynolds ignored protocols and aggressively approached a man just doing his job. What made the video so compelling wasn't just the mistake, it was the contrast. Trent's composure, professionalism, and restraint under pressure stood in stark opposition to Reynolds' unchecked aggression. The public outcry was swift. Comment sections exploded with fury. This is exactly what's wrong with policing today. The FBI agent stayed calm the whole time. That cop? Power tripping. If this is how he treats a federal agent, imagine how he treats everyday civilians. Fire Reynolds began trending on Twitter within hours. On TikTok, creators stitched the video with reactions, breakdowns, and even legal analysis. Former officers, lawyers, and law enforcement trainers chimed in, most agreeing that Reynolds had completely mishandled the situation and likely violated several departmental procedures. By the next morning, national media outlets picked up the story. CNN ran a headline, "Local Officer Detains FBI Agent. Escalation or Misunderstanding?" MSNBC's legal correspondent broke down the implications on live TV, highlighting a disturbing lack of interagency awareness and training at the local level. Fox News featured a heated debate on law enforcement reform and discipline. But it wasn't just about policies anymore. It had become personal. This wasn't some abstract incident in a distant city. People saw themselves in Trent, calm, composed, wrongly accused, and they feared encountering someone like Reynolds in real life. In response to mounting pressure, the police department released a statement the following day. We are aware of the incident involving one of our officers and a federal agent. We are conducting an internal review of the matter and will take all appropriate disciplinary actions. The department is committed to transparency, accountability, and ensuring that all officers are properly trained in interagency cooperation. But to the public, it sounded like damage control. The internet wasn't satisfied. They wanted to know, would Reynolds be suspended? Would there be mandatory retraining? Would the department admit fault? More importantly, the moment ignited a much larger conversation. How many encounters like this happen off camera? Civil rights groups jumped in, pointing out how lucky Agent Trent was to be an FBI agent with a body cam. What if he wasn't FBI? What if he was just another black man sitting in a car? That question echoed across platforms, podcasts, and editorial columns. The footage wasn't just a viral clip. It became a case study. Police academies and federal briefings began using it as a teaching tool. Media outlets used it as a springboard to push for better bias training, de-escalation tactics, and most urgently, interagency communication protocols. Officer Reynolds, once the proud enforcer, now faced internal affairs scrutiny, federal review, and the judgment of millions online. Agent Trent? He went back to work, his operation disrupted, but his reputation stronger than ever. A symbol of restraint, a model of real law enforcement professionalism. And for the rest of the world watching, it was a lesson, captured in 5 minutes, replayed 1,000,000 times, and never forgotten. In the end, Agent Michael Trent did what true professionals do. He went back to work. Despite the chaos Officer Reynolds had caused, the federal operation resumed. Adjustments were made, timelines shifted, and the team refocused. Within days, the mission concluded successfully, with key arrests made and weapons seized. The sting, though slightly delayed, still achieved its goal thanks to the discipline and leadership of agents like Trent. But while the investigation moved forward, the incident itself lingered, not just inside law enforcement circles, but across the entire country. It became a national wake-up call. Officer Reynolds was swiftly placed on administrative leave, pending both internal investigation and review by an interagency oversight panel. Body cam footage, dash cam recordings, and federal surveillance files were all submitted as evidence. Reynolds' superiors found themselves answering tough questions, not only about his conduct, but also about departmental training, escalation policies, and interagency coordination failures. Some tried to defend Reynolds, claiming he was simply acting on instinct, that his suspicions, while misguided, came from a place of concern. But most people, officers included, weren't buying it, because this wasn't a momentary lapse. This was a clear pattern of behavior. An officer who refused to verify ID, ignored a legitimate badge, reached for his weapon without real threat, and escalated a situation that demanded calm. The contrast between the two men couldn't be more striking. Agent Trent, trained in federal tactics and conflict de-escalation, remained calm under pressure. He gave multiple warnings. He prioritized the mission, the law, and even the safety of the very man who was harassing him. Officer Reynolds, by contrast, allowed ego to drive every decision. He ignored protocols, failed to verify identity, and made the fatal mistake of treating authority like a contest, not a responsibility. This wasn't just a story about a cop and an agent. It became a symbol of something bigger. It was about the importance of professionalism in law enforcement, the dangers of unchecked power, the need for mutual respect between agencies, and above all, accountability, no matter the badge you wear. Mainstream media used the story to explore deeper questions. Why do some officers escalate when others de-escalate? What systems are in place to prevent bias, abuse of authority, or ego-driven enforcement? Civil rights advocates, retired police chiefs, and former FBI officials all weighed in. They called for mandatory interagency recognition training, bias awareness programs, and improved protocol enforcement for frontline officers. Because if something like this could happen to an FBI agent, what hope did the average citizen have? Agent Trent never made a public statement. He didn't need to. His calm during the incident spoke volumes. And while his mission was always about the bigger picture, gang takedowns, public safety. His unintended moment in the spotlight left an even more lasting impression. Reynolds, on the other hand, faced consequences. Whether he would return to duty remained uncertain. But his name had become synonymous with what happens when authority is misused and judgment clouded by pride. In the end, this story wasn't just about law enforcement. It was a universal reminder. Every interaction matters. Every choice has weight. And the way you treat someone, especially when you're in a position of power, defines who you really are. Because you never know who you're talking to. They could be a federal agent. They could be your neighbor. They could be someone with more power than you realize. So, if there's one lesson this viral moment left us with, it's this. Treat everyone with respect. Follow the rules. And check your ego before someone else has to do it for you.